Hey guys, today we are going to be talking about everything, like literally everything, from the Adrien and Felix SENTIMONSTER theories, whether or not the Grande Vanilli twin rings are miraculouses in disguise, or perhaps what could hold the amucks, and how Emily Agreste contributes to all of this. But as always, before we get into today's video, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a tea on the show you love. Now, let's get into it. So first, let's talk about Felix and the reason why he could be a sentimonster. We were introduced to Felix in season 3, and from what we know, both Adrien and Felix are not only cousins, but also used to be very close with one another when they were younger, and would have a tendency to play pranks on their parents as they dress up as one another. Now, something that both Adrien and Felix have in common is that they not only look like identical twins, but also lost one of their parents in the same year. Adrien losing his mother from the Peacock Miraculous, and Felix losing his father for a reason that still remains a mystery. Now, as I mentioned, we were introduced to Felix in season 3, but we were actually introduced to the idea of this character back in 2013. If you didn't know, the first concept idea of Miraculous was that the show was to actually be in 2D PV, and much of the plot as we know it today was extremely different back then. Originally, Felix was going to be Adrien and/or Felix Agreste, but however was drastically changed and replaced by the name of Adrien. Thomas actually went on to Twitter a while back to explain that Felix's ego was much too dark to work for the contrast he had in mind for the two characters, Felix and Marinette. Ultimately, this crossed Felix out of the picture and left us with the two lovebirds we have today, Adrien and Marinette. Now, something else that I want to clarify is that the Felix and Marinette that you see in the 2D PV form has nothing to do with the series we have today. That also goes for the character Bridget. Bridget was originally going to be Marinette's name, and some fans even decided to make her Marinette's cousin. But long story short, the 2013 version of Miraculous does not have anything to do with the Miraculous we have today. So going back to Felix, we also know that when he came to Paris, he had his eye on one thing, getting the Grande Vanilli twin rings. And not only did he want it, but even his mom Amelie. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is why these rings are not only important to Gabriel, but also the Grande Vanilli family.
I'd still like to get the rings back, you know.
These rings are obviously very special to me.
And they're very dear to me too, Gabriel. Those jewels have always been in the Grande Vanilli family, not the Agrestes.
A common lurking theory is that if Felix was a sentimonster, his amuck would have been in one of the twin rings, which was the reason he wanted the rings so badly in the first place, so that he could finally have full control over himself and his existence. Plus, as I stated earlier, Felix and Adrien look identical from one another, and the only way this could be somewhat possible is if either Gabriel had a twin brother who married Amelie, or if he was created after Adrien by using the Peacock Miraculous. However, if Felix was really a sentimonster, I actually don't think his amuck would have been in the twin ring, because as we know there's two of them, so it would be almost impossible to identify which one held the amuck. But this now leads me into my other theory, which is that the Grande Vanilli twin rings are no other than the missing Miraculouses seen in one of the boxes from the New York special. So if you look closely, the logo of which the rings would sit on if they were in the Miraculous box looks like two circles overlapping one another. And what else looks like that? The rings. I mean, look how perfectly Gabriel is holding them in this picture. Now, I decided to search the symbolism meaning of two circles intersecting, and what came up shocked me. Two circles overlapping means something great in progress. Two souls combined it creates a sort of ideal that none of them could do on its own. They need each other. Could this be referring to the fact that these rings act as a lifeline to someone, or more specifically, Adrien? Now, to this day, we don't know what a lot of the miraculous powers are, including these rings if they happen to be a miraculous. But considering the symbolism meaning, maybe this miraculous grants the source of light. And if it were the case that both Adrien and Felix are sentimonsters, I would imagine that Emily would have worn one for Adrien and Felix's dad would have worn one for him. And so what led to the ultimate downfall of both of their parents if this happened to be the case? Emily using the Peacock Miraculous. However, that would only work if both Adrien and Felix were Sentimonsters. But personally, I only think one of them are, and it would be Adrien. We learned in the episode Felix that although these rings come from the Grandivanilli family, these are Gabriel and Emily's wedding bands. And going back to the intersecting circle meaning, it needs two souls to be combined for something to be created. And I believe this is referring to Gabriel and Emily's souls being used to form Adrien. And if Emily was wearing the ring while using the Peacock Miraculous, this is what led to her being in the state she is currently in. In season 1, in the episode Roger Cobb, Plagg explains that if Adrien were to have transformed while Plagg had this bracelet stuck on his head, it would have resulted in Cat Noir's powers being damaged.
If you transform, the bracelet will get absorbed with me and damage your powers.
So this now makes me wonder one of the two ways the Peacock Miraculous could have become damaged. Either Emily wearing the ring and the Peacock Miraculous at the same time damaged it, as in the season 3 finale, Cat Noir expresses his concern for Ladybug just wearing 2 Miraculouses.
No, it's too dangerous. Too many powers at the same time.
We don't have a choice.
Or Emily wearing the Peacock Miraculous and this pin resulted in damaging it. Because whether or not both are a miraculous or even just a random jewel, Plagg says that if this bracelet gets sucked up with him, the powers of the holder will malfunction, which I believe would ultimately damage the miraculous. And not to mention, isn't it strange how Chloe had this replica pin of the one we always see Emily wearing? Well, I'm going to be talking all about that in a future video, so be sure to keep my post notifications on so you don't miss it. Okay, now on to the biggest part, which is if Adrien is a Sentimonster. First, let's talk about all the reasons why he could be. For one, he's allergic to feathers, and what are Sentimonsters created from? A mux, aka feathers. He is also perfect. And I mean that literally. Thomas even tweeted a while back, rule number 1 of Miraculous: Adrien is perfect. And what else can be perfect? Sentimonsters.
She's so much more elaborate than any of those we faced before. She's so perfect. There's nothing monstrous about her at all.
Next, in the Shanghai special, Gabriel had mentioned how he started this all 15 years ago. And what else is 15 years old? Adrien. And I know some people might attack me in the comments for saying that, but we saw in the episode Gorilla from season 2 that Gabriel says you can't keep your eye on a 14-year-old boy. And now we're in season 4, which makes me to believe that he is 15, but even if he's still 14, it would only leave a 1-year time gap as to when Gabriel and Emily got their hands on the Peacock Miraculous, which makes me believe they created Adrien from it. But a question that many people have is that if he was a Sentimonster, how could he have possibly aged like a regular human? Now, someone went to Twitter to ask Thomas this, and if it would be possible for a Sentimonster to age, which he replied to by saying, if he's conceived like this, yeah. Okay, well, that did not only confirm that Sentimonsters can age, but who is he referring to when he says he? Is he talking about who I'm thinking, which is Adrien? As I mentioned earlier, the first concepts of Miraculous was that Felix was going to be Adrien. So what if Felix really was born before Adrien, and then Adrien was created based off of Felix, just like when they were originally designing the show? And I also forgot to mention earlier where the Amok could possibly be if Adrien was a Sentimonster, and of course I mentioned the rings, but it could just also be in this pin that we see Emily wearing. Now, in the episode Reflecto, we learned that when a Sentimonster is cataclysmed, they do not become destroyed but malfunction. And when Sabrina here was akumatized and cataclysmed Cat Noir in this clip, all that happened was that he just began to malfunction, just like a Sentimonster. Plus, in the episode Optigami, we discovered for the first time that Sentimonsters are more than capable of using Miraculouses. Now, as many of you may have seen, a little while back, Ezra, the voice director for the English cast, shared a TikTok addressing a bunch of season 4 rumors, which to all of them he said no to, except for Adrien being a Sentimonster and Emily coming back. He responded with this.
This is an old school rumor. We've been saying this since season 2. Everyone's like, oh, Emily's coming back, Emily's coming back. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see, right? You should be scared of anyone being a Sentimonster because that is serious business. But Adrien a Sentimonster? I don't know, that's a far reach. Sounds like a good episode though.
Now, to sum it up, I think this has to be one of the most confusing theory videos I have ever made, but it's because there's just so much to cover and there is so many different scenarios which could make sense to apply to this giant theory. But ultimately, if I had to choose between either Felix or Adrien being a Sentimonster, I would choose Adrien. I just feel like there's so many more valid points that I could see happening and making sense, and how I talked about my theory earlier on the twin rings and the symbolism talking about two souls creating something. I just feel like when I put all these pieces together, it makes sense. But as always, what do you guys think? Do you think Adrien and Felix are Sentimonsters? Or do you think one of them are Sentimonsters? Do you even think that the either of them are Sentimonsters? And what are your thoughts on the Grand Vanilli twin rings? I for one have so many questions, and I'm just so excited for the future of Miraculous. As always, be sure to let me know your thoughts and theories down below, and subscribe so you never miss a tea on the show you love, and I'll see you guys in the next one.